Perfect. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to the event. Today we have independence, integrity, impact, integrating core workplace values into the work of the OAG. And we are joined by Andrew Atherton, Nova Scotia's Assistant Auditor General. Very fortunate, very excited to have you here, Andrew.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Evan.
For sure. So before we turn things over to Andrew, I'm just going to go over a couple stuff. So before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that the Nova Scotia chapter of CES is in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq First Nation. We invite you to keep this in mind during today's session and to reflect on how the presentation content might be able to help us better partner with Indigenous populations, as well as other historically excluded populations. I also just have a few technical notes to go over. First of all, as I'm sure you're used to hearing by now, please keep your mics muted during the presentation to ensure good audio quality. We are going to have time after Andrew's presentation for questions and discussion. We are happy to say that we have Greg Lutz here of Pivot Consulting. He's going to help facilitate the discussion. In the meantime, during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat box at the bottom of your screen. You can click chat. Please feel free to use that to type in any comments or questions while we're going, and we can pick up with that afterwards. Couple more things here. We do always get the question, are slides going to be available? So I'll get ahead of that and say, yes, slides from today's presentation will be available in the coming days. And lastly, as you've noticed, today's session will be recorded. So a recording will be uploaded to the chapter's YouTube channel for people that can't make it or for learning afterwards, that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's all for me. I'll pass things over to Maria Tendencia to introduce today's speaker.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on your lunch break to engage in this, I think, very important topic. And again, we're very pleased to have our Assistant Auditor General, Andrew Atherton, with us today. Andrew graduated from Acadia in 1997 with a bachelor's degree in business administration, and he immediately joined the office of the Nova Scotia Auditor General, and he obtained his CA designation in 2000. So Andrew has worked almost exclusively on performance audits and was promoted to audit principal in 2007 and then to assistant auditor general in 2016. So during his time with the office, he has been responsible for many interesting and impactful audits, including work on the nominee program of the Office of Immigration, the Pandemic Preparedness and Infection Prevention and Control at the Cape Breton and Capitol Health. And more recently, his team has completed audits on topics like diversity and inclusion in the public service. And they're currently completing work looking at some of the early COVID-19 response spending programs, as well as the planning and implementation around the pre-primary program in Nova Scotia. So lots of interesting work and valuable work that Andrew and his team have been involved in. He has also served on various committees with the Canadian Council of Legislative Auditors and co-chaired the annual Performance Audit Symposium in 2019. And Andrew lives in Chester and with his wife and two beautiful children, and he's an avid curler in the winter, and spends a lot of family time at their cottage in the summer. So again, welcome, Andrew, and we're really looking forward to having you today, and thank you for taking the time to prepare your presentation for us today. And so I'll officially hand it over to you, Andrew.
Perfect. Thank you, Maria. All right, I'm going to try to share my screen and then start playing my slides here, folks. Bear with me if I screw it up, because it wouldn't be surprising. Let's share this screen. All right, can everybody see that?
Looks
perfect.
Good.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, I'm going to skip right quickly through here. So not a whole lot left for me to say. Other than that, things have certainly gone a little bit off track since I started preparing my presentation last week. So thanks to all of you for joining me today under these, I'll call them uncertain times. I hope you're all doing okay to manage through this latest wave of COVID and that you're staying both physically and mentally healthy. I think both of my kids will stay out of my office for the presentation, but I apologize if anybody wanders in looking for something. I wasn't counting on having a house full. So I was asked to talk about how to connect what we do in performance audits with what you do on evaluations. I'm very qualified to speak about our audits and the impact they have. I've been doing performance audits for almost 24 years, as Maria mentioned. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with your role and as such can't really speak to that. So what I will talk about what we do, how we do it, and try to show how that has contributed to the respect that OAG reports receive. Then we can have a discussion following my talk about how to bring evaluation into the same light, and I can answer any questions that you may have. I was asked in preparing for the session to talk about what gives our office its power. So before I talk about what we do, I'll start with our authority. Technically, it's a pretty simple question. Our power is derived from the Auditor General's Act, which is probably the biggest thing that our office has that you folks would not have. We're backstopped by a very strong piece of legislation. Obviously, there's more to our reputation than our act, but it is the foundation of what we do. So a couple of interesting or key pieces from that act. It gives the Auditor General the power to run our office as we see fit. This is important for us to remain independent from the people that we audit. But we still rely on various components of government for some support, IT and HR, for instance, and we do follow most government policies such as procurement. That's because we decide they are right for us. The Act also gives the Auditor General the powers of a Supreme Court judge in terms of requiring someone to talk to us or produce evidence. We haven't used that power to subpoena anyone in my time with the office, but the fact it exists is enough to make sure we never really need to use it. I'm a little nervous about that last line because I'm pretty sure I saw that Adam Harding from our office is on the call today. And the only audit I couldn't remember is when we did our audit of the nominee program a few years ago, if we had to subpoena anyone for that or not. So if I'm wrong, Adam will correct me, but generally it's simply the fact that we can subpoena you, that everybody, certainly everybody in government understands that if we ask for it, we can get it. So we really don't have to use it. So that works well for us. In terms of what the Act allows us to audit, basically if it happens in government or is connected to government, we can audit it. We can follow the dollar to external organizations when they receive funding, and we can see whatever we need to from any government department or agency, etc. Another key piece is that we're exempt from FOIPOP, so that what we are given is safe with us. This helps when we're looking at sensitive information, health records, or anything from health, education, those sort of things. It's nice to be able to tell people, no, we're completely exempt from FOIPOP. If you give it to us, it doesn't become more at risk, and it will never become public from our end. Okay, so getting back to the slide. Purpose of our performance audits is to provide independent, objective assurance to the host. It's kind of a mouthful. So in simpler terms, our reports help shine a light on what is happening in government and allow MLAs, particularly those on the Public Accounts Committee, and the public at large to hold government accountable. But I see my job at an even simpler level. We're here to make things better in government. To do that, we have to get management to agree with our recommendations, which means we have to maintain good relationships across government and also ensure our reporting is always accurate and supported by the facts. As I go through the rest of my talk today, those two steps, being right and having management buy-in, will underpin much of it. So how do we decide what to audit? Well, this says it is always our choice. Technically, Executive Council can direct us, but that's very rare. I haven't actually seen it in my 24 years. So for all intents and purposes, let's just go with we decide what we're going to audit. We get lots of emails, phone calls, even the odd actual letter from the public, requests from opposition members to look at this, that, or the other. And while there's a lot of white noise in these calls and emails, some of them are legitimate and lead to potential audit topics. For example, our work at the Workers' Compensation Board was in part driven by concerns we received from multiple organizations, public, the media, we had a lot of calls that led us in that direction. Organizations can also come to us to complete an audit, but it's important to know that we always determine what we look at. Our work at the IWK is a really good example of that. With all the issues surrounding their CEO and her expenses a couple of years ago, their board came and asked us to do a performance audit. We were clear with them that we would decide what the audit covered. So yeah, we're happy to come and do an audit, but it's going to be our call. Eventually, we decided not to look directly at the CEO expenses, but instead focused on a broader economic concern or systemic concerns, sorry, and board governance. So they asked us to do the audit and we said, great. And then we said, okay, yeah, but here's what it's going to be. Can't say whether they were surprised by what we chose or not, but ultimately the point I want to make is that no matter who asks us to do it, we'll decide what we look at. Now, at the end of the day, the sitting Auditor General is a big driver of what we audit, but the ability to make an impact is always a key factor. I'm confident this will be the case when our new AG starts with the office next week, and it'll be the same long after I retire. The person sitting in the corner office, so to speak, he or she has a big impact on what we choose, but it's always going to be tied to having an impact and helping to make government better. All right, so once we picked what we're going to do, we start planning for the performance audit. And they're all pretty much the same in terms of this step. There's a lot of reading, a lot of talking, generally digging around, looking on the internet, looking at policies, et cetera, to learn how the area we're auditing works and what the risks may be. We also look a lot at what other auditors general from across Canada and even internationally to see what they've done. We look to see what topics they've looked at, what did they find, what did they recommend. Doesn't mean we'll find the same thing, but it helps us ID potential risk areas. We will also use other jurisdictions even to decide what audits to do. So before we've even picked a topic, we're always looking at what everyone else is doing and see if there's a topic that might apply to Nova Scotia and vice versa. We're working on rural internet right now, and we've had many jurisdictions phone us, other auditors phone us to talk about what we're doing, because a lot of people are looking at that as we all sit at home right now using our potentially rural internet, depending on where we live, to call into this. It becomes even more important. So throughout the planning process, we're regularly talking with management to figure out how things are going and see if they have any problem areas they would like us to look at. Not everyone is happy to share, but many are. And as I mentioned earlier, this helps us build a good working relationship from the beginning. If they can flag a couple of areas that are really causing them concern, and perhaps our audit can help them move forward on that, whether that's an internal improvements or sometimes it's just getting a little more attention, helps the government at large provide a little more funding to move something forward. That said, there are certainly times where you can tell that management is trying to steer us away from something. I think it's fair to say that we may just do the opposite of what they're asking in that case. We don't always listen, but we're always asking and talking to see what people have, what they think we should look at. Okay, so setting the objectives and criteria for an audit, that's where the rubber meets the road for our audits. Whereas our financial statement team, the other half of our office, have predetermined standards to measure their audits against. Our standards only cover how we do the work. We have to determine our own objectives and criteria for every audit. Ideally, these are from an externally supported organization, but realistically, that doesn't happen often. 99% of the time, we have to create our own objectives and criteria. Usually they're fairly common sense based and often derived from a previous audit. Even if it's a new audit, it's a new topic, but we've probably done something similar or someone else has done something similar, and we can adjust those criteria to fit this one. Now, this is the first place where we have to get agreement from the auditee. So management don't have to agree with us that we're going to come and do an audit. That's our call. We're going to come and do the audit. They do have to acknowledge responsibility for the subject matter, and our standards require that we ask that they agree, whether they agree with the objectives and criteria that we're going to use to measure their performance. And if they don't agree, all we have to do is document it in the file, and I think we'd have to put it in our report as well. I haven't actually had that issue yet, because we can usually find a way to get wording that works for both sides. It accomplishes what we want, and they can live with it. I won't compromise the audit that I want to do just to get their agreement, but by working together, we're able to find common ground basically every time. And this is important because when we go to make our recommendations at the end of the day in our report, I don't want the auditee out there publicly saying, no, we never agreed with that measuring stick. Those criteria weren't appropriate. So it doesn't matter what the auditor found, they weren't measuring us appropriately. That would really undermine the value of our recommendations and the conclusions. So we work hard at the front end to make sure everybody's on board with how we're going to measure them. Sometimes they know that they're not going to they're not going to measure up very well, but as long as they acknowledge that it's a reasonable measuring stick, then we're good to go forward, and we won't have them publicly undercutting us at the end. So moving into the actual field work of our audits, I suspect this is very similar to the evaluations that you folks do. It's the guts of the audit. It's where we spend most or a majority of the time, but I won't spend a ton of time on this slide. Each one is a little different from the last, but each involves some combination of talking to lots of people, reviewing tons of files, reports, other documents. And depending on the nature of the audit, we often do extensive testing to see whether policies, processes, standards, legislation, regulations, etc., whether those are being followed, whether everything's being documented properly. There's lots of details and lots of questions. One area I'd like to see us get into more is data analytics. Unfortunately for our performance audits, the data simply is often not there, not good enough. It's too much for us would take too much work to make it usable for us to get the benefit. It's another area where our financial statement team is able to do a lot more of this, but they kind of have a standard data set every year where it's coming from the same source, and they're able to do the work they need to. And they're doing a lot more effective use of data analytics than my side of the shop is right now. But the reality is we're still faced with paper files in some instances. And typically, even the electronic systems are not sufficiently reliable for us to work with them. I know we're in the early stages of field work right now, and we're faced with paper files spread across the province. And with COVID, we're trying to figure out how we're going to manage that. But it's pretty hard to do data analytics when all the records are sitting in pieces of paper in various offices across the province. So it's an area I'd like us to get to, but it's not something that is imminent, I wouldn't say. Okay, so we've done the field work. Now we have to clear our results with the auditee. So this is making sure that we have the facts right. It's a very important step for us. It ties back to what I said at the beginning. Our conclusions are meaningless if the underlying facts are called into question. So we start this process basically from as soon as we start, even I say during field work, but probably it's even sooner. It's when we're doing planning that we're clearing things as we find it. So the staff member completing the file testing will be constantly back and forth with whoever is responsible for the files. They might be going back and saying, okay, I can't find Form X in this file. It doesn't seem to be here. And they'll work with the person responsible for the file to determine, okay, is it missing? Is it in another file? Is it somewhere at the back of the file, not where it's supposed to be? Maybe there was a different form that was used at that time and nobody's explained that to us yet. So we're going to go through 1,000 hoops to make sure that that file, that document isn't there. I've always said to my team, to our newer auditors, you assume if somebody says, oh no, we don't do that, that sounds like an easy solution. Great, we'll just say they don't do it. But it's actually the most complicated thing because we have to look under every rock to see that it's not there. I don't want a report that says they never had this file, and then somebody else says, oh yeah, here it is, it's over there. You just never asked me. So no is a tough answer for us when we're doing field work, but that's why we clear it. We go back and forth as much as we can. We take a similar approach with interviews. We always clear the interview notes with the interviewee. So we send the notes back to them for confirmation that everything we've written down is what they said. One benefit of this is sometimes we get more information that they've thought of since the interview. Although on occasion, people will want to roll back what they've told us, that can be frustrating. But when it happens, we respect their wishes and work to find other sources to either confirm or deny whatever it was that they don't want to tell us anymore. So as we get towards the end of our field work, we'll typically send summarized conclusions to management. So this serves two purposes. First of all, maybe they know something that the staff below them didn't know. Maybe there's a policy or process in another division that satisfies our concerns that they can share with us. Maybe something existed from long ago that newer staff aren't aware of. The second purpose is just for them to know what to expect when our draft report comes out. In that case, we're not looking for sign off. We're just letting them know, here's what we found, here's the issues. And then when they see it in a draft report, it won't be quite as shocking. So that draft report, once we're done, it is cleared in detail with management. Goes through our rigorous internal processes, and I'll talk to those in a couple of slides. But once we've gone through that, the draft is sent to the auditee for their review. We usually give them a couple of weeks, and then we sit down and have a meeting. Those meetings can take anywhere from a half hour to 4 hours. You never have any idea how long they're going to be. But we do need the buy-in from the auditee, from their leaders. And we need to ensure there isn't a word in the report that they disagree with. Well, no, shouldn't say disagree with, that they can say is wrong. These meetings, they often focus on our recommendations, but we really want the auditees to review the whole report, and we ask if they have concerns about any of it. We really don't want to have an auditee talking after we release the report publicly, saying, no, the AG is wrong about this. No, they're wrong about that. They have this wrong. If they think we're wrong on the factual end of things, we want to cover it in clearing. They'll often say, okay, well, what about, they say, we don't agree with that. You're not right on this. So we ask, we need more support. Send us some documents. It's extremely frustrating, particularly for newer auditors, because I can recall sitting at the table as an audit officer or a manager thinking, I've already asked them 6 times, and now they're telling my boss that they have something that I told them we didn't have. I would say 9 times out of 10, when an auditee says, oh no, we do have that, we have a policy on that, and we ask for more support for it, they send us things they've already sent us, and we say, no, that doesn't work, that's not good enough, it doesn't get us there for this reason or that. But if they do have something else, if they can support something, if they can show us, yes, we do have that policy, or we do have a policy to cover this, we need to change our report because we need it to be right. We can't have something in there that anyone undermines at the end of the day. So during this clearing process, we also work on them with messaging. Sometimes we think a sentence says one thing, but to someone inside that industry, it says something altogether different. And we're happy to make slight adjustments to make sure our readers get the intended message. More often than not on that, we're changing a word and we're left inside the office saying, I don't understand how that is any different than what it said before. And sometimes we're saying, that sure seems like it's harsher now than it was before. But if it makes the auditee happier, if they prefer that wording, then we're going to run with that. Now, despite all of that, it's our report. We do refuse to change things, I would say pretty much every report, because like I started to say earlier, it's not whether they like it or whether they agree with it, it's whether it's right. So if something is right and they just don't like it, unless there's some way to say it better that makes them happy, we're going to stick with it and they're going to deal with it. So the entire process, it's a fine line. We want management on board, as they're the ones in the best position to make the change happen. But we also have to stay independent. Our work has to be right, but credible. We cannot just report what management wants, or the public will eventually lose confidence in what we're saying. So there's no formula for it. I just rely on my years of experience and try to find the right balance and rely on my team to help me figure out where do we have to take a strong stance and where can we be more flexible. So let's talk about how that draft report gets put together. We're in the middle of doing 2 of them right now, so I think some of the people on the call are probably listening in and will correct me later if I said it wrong. But once we've done our field work, cleared the facts and findings with the auditee, we spend a lot of time on the draft. And to be fair, we've been talking about the draft since very early in the audit. Most issues that come up during field work lead to discussions about how would we word that in the report? What support would we need to say that this was done well or this was done poorly? That's not to predetermine what the main issues would be, but rather it helps us work out the best wording while also making sure that we have the support we need to back up what we will eventually say. The whole team is involved in writing their own sections as much as possible. And the team leader, the principal in our office, pulls together the various sections together into a cohesive report before it comes to me. I'll talk more about our review process later on, so now I'll move on to the most important part of our draft report. It has to be right. As I said in our clearing process, factual accuracy is the single most important part of our reporting. This is the foundation on which all of our reports are built and upon which our entire reputation rests, in my opinion. I'm fine if someone disagrees with our opinions or our conclusions even, but not the facts that support them. So if we say, just sort of covered this, we say there's no policy to cover employee travel. I don't want the auditee holding up a policy when we release a report saying the AG never asked for this one. So we ask them repeatedly, is there anything wrong in the report? Is there anything? We get multiple sign-offs confirming we're accurate. Internally, to make sure that we have the support, the audit team goes through every word and every sentence in our report to make sure it ties to something in the file. This isn't done at a page level, not even a paragraph, not even every sentence. At every unique thought or statement must be tied back to the file to clearly show the evidence we have backing it up. We spend hundreds of hours on our reports to make sure they say exactly what we want them to say and that everything in there is supported. So once the facts are correct, the report has been checked and then cleared with the auditee. Our internal process requires us to get a response to the recommendations from the auditee. And that is an internal process. There's no standards that require that we get a response from the auditee to put in our report. I believe there are jurisdictions across the country that don't do this, but internally we still do this. So we ask for three things in response. State that they agree with the recommendation. So we spent a lot of time in the clearing process to make sure they're okay with the recommendation and can say they agree. Obviously, if they don't agree, they're not going to say that. And it has happened. I recall, I think, one recommendation, certainly from our school capital planning audit, but 99.9% of the time we get to a place that works for them and for us. Then we ask for timelines. How long until they will take action to address the recommendation? This is important to us, but mostly it gives public accounts and the media, the public, a tool to ask why something isn't done yet. Well, if it goes slower than promised, because that never happens. Beyond that, I encourage them to say what they've already done. Often a lot of time has passed between the end of our field work, so when we found something wasn't done, told management about it, and the report getting tabled. So that can result in a lot of change having already occurred. And I always want auditees to realize they can take some credit for that. We can say, we've already implemented this, we've implemented that, and by next April, we'll have this done. So we don't audit their responses, but we read them to make sure we're comfortable with them. Probably push back more often than not for at least one thing, but eventually it's you accept what they've given as long as they're not saying, no, the auditor's wrong, we do that already. Then we can live with it. So we've got extremely rigorous internal review processes in the office. It's a big part of how we ensure that our files are complete, meet all required standards, and that everything in the report is evidence backing it up. And all that goes to making sure what we say is right. I had a quick look through our time system, and probably 200 to 300 hours on most of these audits spent purely on review, just doing the various processes. So first step, detail review. It's done by the principal on the audit. Covers three areas. First, make sure we adhered to our standards. Second, completed everything we intended to in our audit plans. And finally, that our conclusions are the right ones, that they are consistent with the evidence in the file. The detail reviewer looks at every word in the file. They check every link, open every attachment. They work from our detailed audit programs to see that every procedure has been completed and every audit question asked and answered. They go through every sample item tested, looked at what we found while ensuring the summarized results match the details and that the details make sense. As I mentioned in our reporting slide, part of detail review is checking the referenced audit report to make sure that every sentence and word is tied back to the file and says the same as what we have in our file. Next up is the summary review. It's the level that I'm responsible for. I consider any bigger issues or topics of consequence and make sure that our conclusions are reasonable. I review all working papers, but not nearly in the detail that the principal has done in their detail review. And part of it is making sure that that detail review has been done. My role, I would say it's made easier because I'm typically involved throughout the process and talking through any issues of concern. So all I'm needing to do at the summary review level is making sure those are fully and accurately documented in the file and consistent with what I've heard throughout the audit. Next up, we have EQCR, Engagement Quality Control Review. That's a mouthful, so EQCR for us. This is our QA process, would be a more generic description. It's done by a principal who was not involved in the audit, so someone not on the audit team. They check that standards and office practices were met, including that detail and summary review were done on all working papers. They spend a lot more time in the report than in the file, and making sure that any issues of consequence from the report are supported in the file. Everything has been referenced to the file, and those references have been checked by the detail reviewer. ELAC, Executive Leadership Advisory Committee. I say that's what it's called now. It's changed. The title of this has changed every time we have a new Auditor General. So we'll see in the coming months if Kim wants a different phrase for it. But basically, it's our executive team, the audit team, the EQCR principal, and our communications director sitting down to go through the draft report to discuss any issues or concerns. Allows the audit team to answer any questions that the rest of the group has. Can uncover improved wording or more clear messaging. We're often asked questions about, so why are you okay with this or not okay with that? Or why did you say it this way? Or we thought you had said earlier that this was going to be an issue and why isn't it in the report? So it's a full review of the report. Make sure that our messages are clear and that the Auditor General is comfortable with the report before it leaves our office. Once we get through ELAC, we've gone through all of our processes. Now the draft report is going to go out to the auditee, and the Auditor General needs to be good with that because we're going to lose control a little bit. We can still make changes, but it's getting close to the end. So now we're going to talk about the end. So tabling of our reports is, I consider it the anticlimactic final stage of the process. Once a report is tabled with the speaker or the host, it can be made public and we post it on our website. This is the day that the Auditor General takes over. The team kind of gets to relax and be happy another one's finished and start looking forward. The Auditor General does interviews, and in pre-COVID times would do a press conference to help explain the report of the day. Currently, that's mostly just we release our videos, and we'll talk about that in a second. We haven't been doing the press conference, and hopefully we can get back to that at some point in the not too distant future. Traditionally, we released and met with public accounts on the same day. This is no longer the case. Now we table when it works best for our office and then meet with Public Accounts Committee when they choose to call the audit team to the committee. When they're called in, we will attend for a 30-minute in-camera briefing. I'll give a short presentation on the key elements of the chapter and then take some questions from the committee. Immediately following that, the auditee attends a 2-hour public session to answer questions. So the release date is always exciting. You get some media coverage. You get to see what attention your report has achieved. But after all the work to get there, it's kind of okay, and now we're done and move on. So communications, this is a big growth area, I would say, for us. At least it's an area of significant potential change. So in the middle of this pandemic, our office hired our first ever communications director. We're still figuring out all the ways that Amy can help us, but the impacts are already showing. For instance, the slides you've looked at so far today are a far cry from what you would have seen a year ago when I would have had to create my own. It would have been very boring. There would have been no pictures. There would have just been some words. So you can thank Amy for these ones not being quite so mundane. In terms of our communications, we've always poured a ton of time into the words in our reports, as I've been explaining for the last few minutes. So this won't change a lot right now. Although our new Auditor General might have some things she wants to see change, and Amy will be working with us on formats, things such as getting more pictures in to support the words. The effort is still gonna be there, the same approach. Under our previous AG, we started doing a front page called a one-pager, sometimes it's two, to condense the messaging for each chapter. We also started releasing a video for each chapter. For now, both of these will continue. I envision Amy providing a lot of input and improvement to both of them. I know the video scripts have gotten shorter for our upcoming releases. And personally, I'm hoping our front pages can move a little bit away from words and become a little more, a few more pictures, more graphics, make it a little more visual. But Kim's gonna have a lot of input on that and what she likes and doesn't like when she starts next week. And this is where Amy is bringing so much more to the office. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all things I do not use personally. But until we hired Amy, I was responsible for wording of our social media messaging. Needless to say, I'm happy to review and approve the messaging now, and you will definitely notice an improvement in the quality and effectiveness of our social media presence. She's taking us to more places than we've been in the past and understands how to use those. So if you're following the office on any of these, you're definitely going to see an improvement. And if you're not following them, what are you waiting for? Unless you're like me and you're not on there at all. Despite the fact that I was doing social media, I do think we've done a great job of communicating in the past. And now we're going to do so with more purpose and more consistent messaging. I'm really excited to see where we can go with Amy's support. So once we issue a report, it's up to the department or agency to make the changes. Public accounts, the media, the general public keep them accountable for what they do, but our act, for all its strengths, does not give us the authority to make anyone do anything. We can make them talk to us, we can make them give us evidence. But once we make a recommendation, we can't make them fix it. We can't make them change anything at all. Our power lies in our words and the attention they typically generate. To that end, we do conduct a follow-up process to shine a light on what has happened with our recommendations. It's another one that Adam's responsible for, so if he's listening, I'm sure I'm going to get something slightly wrong, but he won't correct me till later, I hope. So we do publish an annual follow-up. It includes our assessment of management status update for audits after 2, 3, and 4 years. So we look at it for a 3-year period, but we give them 2 years to get things in shape before we go in. For this, management gives us an assessment of their status. I'll simplify it today to say it's complete or not complete. We don't have any in progress or anything like that. It's either you're done or you're not done. There are a few others, do not intend to implement, it's no longer relevant, but for all intents and purposes, done or not done. So they give us that status. We review anything they say is done and ask for evidence to support it. We don't look at those they say that are not done. We assume if they say they didn't do it, that they probably didn't do it. I think it's worth noting that in recent history shows that government is giving us a very accurate assessment of their progress. Very few changes resulting from our review. It's single digits out of 100 odd. I think we were 2 or 3 that we switched from government saying they were done, and we had to say, no, based on what we've looked at, you're not quite there yet. But that's really good to know the government, they're giving us an honest assessment. I can say that that has not always been the case, but it goes to the trust and overall positive relationship we've developed over the last 6 or 8 years with government. So about 2 years ago, we started including 2 extra pieces of information with our follow-up report. First one was a management update on the status of all recommendations from the 1-year-old audits. So we're not ready to look at those yet. We're not holding government accountable saying you should be done these, but we're giving management a chance to say, here's where we stand. Here's what we've done. We've finished this one and that one, and we're 2/3 of the way through these. So they get to put a little 150-word narrative for each one. We give them the same kind of a progress update. So again, they can write a narrative for any recommendations that they say are not complete. So for the ones that we looked at, the 2, 3, and 4-year-old audits, if it's not complete, they can tell us, they can tell the public, what have we done? Where do we stand? We don't do anything with these updates. We publish them with our report. but we don't audit them at any level. We read them to make sure they're not completely unreasonable or run contrary to something we already know. But basically, we leave it to management to say what they want to say. Both of these changes have given public accounts more information with which to monitor progress, but they also give auditees a chance to tell the story of what have they accomplished. They're not quite done. We've often been asked, why don't we have an in progress status or something like that? And I prefer either done or not done, because realistically, everything's in progress. Once you've had one meeting to think about doing it, you can say, yeah, we're working on it. So I prefer this approach where we give you done or not done, and then let them have a narrative to say how far along they are. All right, so this is the question really I was tasked with covering today. Purpose being to see how your evaluations can be viewed similarly. I don't think there's any one thing that leads to the trust we enjoy. I think everything in this presentation combines to lead to that trust. We've been doing it for a long time. Based on Amy's slide, since 1909. I did not realize that it was that long, but it's been a long time we've been doing this. And everything I've listed in this presentation has helped people to have confidence in our reports. In addition, we have a solid act to back us up. Our audits are prepared following clear standards and to ensure they're consistently and properly done. I also don't think you can understate the importance of our independence. We report directly to the House, but also to the media and the public, either through traditional or now social media. And while we work closely with management on wording to get their buy-in, ultimately our reports are our reports. We audit what we want, we report it as we see fit. No political involvement, no political interference. But we also take our responsibility very seriously. It's a never-ending mantle we carry. We have to be right every time on every single thing we say. One mistake will undermine our credibility, and each of those is cumulative. If people are able to chip away at that, eventually they could stop trusting us. My challenge is to make sure that nothing I do in this role diminishes the value of our office for those who hold this position in the future. The former deputy who acted for a while that just left, that was always one of his lines, that he viewed the reputation and responsibility of our office. It was his job to make sure that continued intact when he left, that nothing we do undermines the future. So when the wonderful team that are working for me now, as they move up and one of them takes my role, I want to make sure that people continue to trust our audits, that hasn't changed. So I don't have a silver bullet that will help evaluations achieve the same position as our performance audits, the same reputation. This is a long-term process, and every little piece helps to build that confidence. So I appreciate having a chance to chat today. I'll be happy to take some questions and extend our discussions around what it is that you folks do on a daily basis. I'm going to try to figure out how to stop sharing my screen with me.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Andrew. That was excellent. And I can say personally, I've learned a lot and I've been furiously taking notes. But I will pass things over to Greg to get the Q&A going.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I haven't seen anything come up in the chat yet, but folks are welcome to use the chat or raise your hand. I see we do have one person, Peter McIntosh, who's raised his hand. So go on, Peter. You're our first caller.
Thank you, Greg. Just a question. One thing I didn't take away from the presentation today, Andrew, was a sense of your comfort level, I guess, with the resources, the human resources available in your office. I know in our on the private sector side, it's always a question of how much time we have, how many people can we devote to it, and we always want to do an A++ job. So it'd be interesting to hear your comments about where things stand in the AG's office in that regard. Thank you.
I think that it's safe to say that more would be awesome. It'd be great to, you can always use more people. One line that I took out of my notes from one of the deputy, I think when I started with the office, is picking performance audits. there's a ton of low-hanging fruit out there. There's a ton of audits we can do, ton of opportunities for us to add value. The limitation is how many people we have and how much time we have. That's has not changed, and I don't think it will change. It's up to us to make do with what we have, and we're reasonably well staffed. Some of our neighboring jurisdictions are much smaller than us in terms of their performance audit teams in particular. So we have a good team, and it's up to me to maximize the value of that team. If anybody wants to offer me another 5 or 6 performance auditors, I would happily take them and have a lot of work for them to do, but that's not really the reality in government right now. So we'll work with what we've got.
Thanks. I have kind of a follow-up question, which is, when you're developing performance auditors, obviously you didn't just come out of Acadia ready to go as a performance auditor. You've had some professional development over the years, and it would be similar for a lot of the evaluators. Here today, they didn't necessarily go to evaluation school. We're folks that have our own kind of subject matter expertise and have developed through professional development evaluation skills. Where do folks in your office go for professional development? Is there an Auditor General school somewhere in Ottawa that everybody passes through?
There is not, and particularly for performance audit, there's a lot of different approaches across the country. In our office, we still require everybody to get their CPA designation. In part for our office, that's because all of my team work on our financial statement audits, and we'll be starting that shortly. So we require the CPA there. I like the CPA, CA mindset. It leads to good questioning, but there is no Auditor General school. There is a Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation, I think it's called now, that offers a lot of professional development. So there are, right from your performance audit 101s up to more advanced courses. So we send our team through the various courses from them. But the more I've done this and the more I talk to people, and right now I'm speaking to Rachel and Pon that I see out there, it's time. It's time doing these performance audits. The more you do, the more experiences you have to draw on to say, okay, this is kind of like, I know this audit has nothing to do with that one, but remember when we audited over there and we saw a similar situation? It's kind of had parallels and you start to understand it. And there is no, again, I said there's no silver bullet to make evaluation and audit seem the same. There's also no silver bullet to become a really good performance auditor. Ask a lot of questions, listen to what people are saying, trust in yourself, but time makes the biggest difference.
Yep, and that would probably be the same. Probably a lot of folks watching this now would say the same thing. Similarly, so how could departments do more of their own evaluation? So you say you'd like to have more folks in the AG's office to kind of expand your reach, and again, your goal that you mentioned in your slides was to improve government. And the departments and agencies, they have the same goal. They want to improve government, but we would say they're not necessarily using evaluation to its full extent. Like, are there opportunities where departments and agencies could take on more evaluation within their own functions, and not to put you out of business, but it may be to complement or supplement the work that you're doing?
Well, we often have a result from our audits that government created a new program or started something and never put any measuring blocks in. They never said, this is what it's supposed to accomplish. And after 2 years, we're going to evaluate this. And after 5 years, we're going to evaluate. So 100%, there's an opportunity for government to do more evaluation of what they're doing. First of all, though, a lot of that I think requires government to set an expectation. What do we want to accomplish from this project, this program, whatever it is? Because if you don't lay out what you're intending to accomplish, it's kind of hard to say whether you succeeded. And too often I find government wants to say they've succeeded because they did a new program, but you don't know what it was supposed to do. what it was supposed to accomplish. And therefore, I don't think you can say it's successful if you haven't set down your expectations.
And you mentioned as well that, and by the way, folks, I don't have to do all the questioning. If anybody wants to use the chat or raise your hand.
Looks like Jen has her hand. Jen Dixon
Jen
has her
has
hand
saved
up.
me and you from one of my questions.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks so much for your presentation. I mostly wanted to say hello because I'm an evaluator within the Nova Scotia provincial government within Department of Labor and Advanced Education. And you'd mentioned you didn't know too much about evaluation, so I figured perhaps you didn't know there are a couple of evaluators within government here. And so actually on the call is myself, Evan, and our coworker, Catherine. We all work in the Skills and Learning branch at LAE as internal evaluators. And so we work with programs all within Skills and Learning around developing their objectives, outcomes. We help inform some of the strategic planning around it, as well as doing evaluation of some of those programs and helping to support them when they do evaluation. So I don't know, I guess like in the future, like are there opportunities where those who are doing evaluation within government can collaborate or work more with the OAG when audits do happen? Because you mentioned with the performance audits, you guys don't do too much data visualization because there isn't there. And we actually do a fair bit of data visualization using the data collected by programs, at least within our area. So just putting it out there.
I think there is definitely opportunity for some collaboration. I think anywhere that that departments do have evaluators is that the right description? Because like I said, this is new to me.
I'll say within like the Nova Scotia government, it kind of varies. So there's under the Canadian Evaluation Society, which is the professional body that oversees evaluators, there is the credentialed evaluator designation that you, similar to like CPA, where you have to meet criteria to receive certification. Same is for a CE. So within our department, we actually have 3 full-time dedicated positions to evaluations, but it's not the same in every department. And I know there's a couple people also on the call who work in other departments like the PSC that do evaluation. I think I saw Rima's name from CCH as well, who does a little bit. So there's kind of like it varies, but there are a couple people who are credentialed evaluators.
I think it's something that having done this presentation today and talked to you folks and read more about you in the last month, I'm more aware of it. I know that some point during the back and forth, one of our recommendations or one of the bullets on our front page that talked about more evaluations needing to be done, I can assure you I will be more conscious of that wording now, and I'll be encouraging the team when we're in the field. Are there professional evaluators part of this, and in the department or for the program? And my gut instinct is if we see that there are professional evaluators, then we're probably going to see a program that's set up a little bit better. It would seem unlikely to me that a program was set up with no measuring sticks and no intent to evaluate it if there were professional evaluators sitting at the table. So I think it would be a good thing, and we will be more conscious of it and try to take advantage to the extent that we can.
I think too, also just add that you guys do have because you have more of an authority when you're making your recommendations than perhaps I do. When you are putting in your recommendations, that programs and departments have logic models and evaluation frameworks and evaluation, that you do have more authority to help enforce that and create perhaps more of a culture of evaluation within government. Like there are very few positions within government that are devoted to evaluation. It is, for the most part, as far as I know, done off the side of many people's desks, or it's outsourced to external consultants. So you do have an opportunity to help change.
That fits with my not really knowing what a professional evaluator was, that we just haven't, it doesn't come up a lot in our audits, but it's certainly in terms of talking about us having the more power. We don't have more power per se, but we definitely have what I call a really bright light. And it's an opportunity sometimes what we say in a report. There's one example that I remember our work at infection control that we largely took a list of recommendations that Infection Prevention Control Nova Scotia had already published. And we put them in as an appendix and we talked about how these needed to be done, and everything changed. Cape Breton went from the worst to the gold standard within 2 years because we just put our spotlight on things that other people had already said. And I would think there would be opportunities in cases where there may have been evaluations done and maybe the recommendations weren't being listened to as much. We do come with a big light and people do listen to what we say. So it will definitely be an opportunity for us, if we cross paths with any of you folks, to listen to what you're saying and try to help you move things forward a little bit.
Feel free to reach out at any point. We're happy to talk more.
Perfect, will do.
Yes, well, hopefully this session will lead to further discussions. But as I say that, I notice that we're coming close to the closing time. Is it back over to you, Evan? Or?
So I believe it's over to Peter to close us off.
Yeah.
Yes, just a couple of words. And before I thank our speaker, I've been asked to mention that tomorrow, April 29th, between 12 and 1:30, there's an online Zoom meeting of folks who wish to gather and speak from across Atlantic Canada, actually from the evaluation societies in each of the 4 provinces, to discuss participation in the National Evaluation Conference. And if anyone is interested in that and you wish to participate, I'm not sure, I have the link. Perhaps I could, what would be the best way, Evan, to have folks email you?
I'll post a link in the chat here. Just
okay, great. Thank you very much.
Or people can check out our blog, CES-NS.ca. There's also a posting there about it.
So just in closing, I wish to thank our speaker today. It was very interesting, insightful. Andrew, it was exactly, I think, what we needed to hear. And it's evident upon hearing your speech and your talk that we're fortunate to have someone like yourself in the AG's office, someone as thorough and knowledgeable and experienced. And really, the word I wrote down and then underlined a few times is I came away with a real sense of integrity in the work that you, in what you bring to the job. So it's quite reassuring. And also for me, it was very interesting because it's almost like a peek behind the curtain, and to know that these reports, which come out in the media every now and then, kind of out of the blue, that there's so much work and good, solid work at play. And it's wonderful to know that this is happening in our province, and something I'm sure would be the envy of other provinces across our country. And then just lastly, I think the linkage as well to our democracy, you spoke about the Public Accounts Committee. It's very reassuring in these turbulent times to know that there's this measure of very important and strict accountability that's brought to bear on our government. And I think it's just to communicate that to the larger Nova Scotia public would be, so more people are aware of it, is just an incredibly important task. And it's great that you now have a communications director on that front. And just in closing, thank you very much. And I know our chapter is very thankful for what you brought today to the community.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. And none of what I could do would be possible without the team underneath me. So I got a great group that do all that work. And then appreciate your kind words.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you for the next event.
So
take care.